I'm never free, Gabrielle.
You and I live the same reality. Okay.
Like, I have not eaten at this crap.
There's a lot of. Show you, kind of give you.
Yes.
And then later, we'll like talk.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
You know what? That's beautiful. What? Just this whole Pellegrino. That's pretty good. Or did Jean bring that? No, you did that.
It was Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did the whole thing. It was I'm very tired, but I'm excited for this weekend. And we're all here, Stacey. So many of us are here. I think that feels a little more organic as opposed to. Yeah. Wait, here we go.
Yeah, we can start. Have any of these? I'm going to do this.
Everybody likes to stand up.
And I'm gonna do that. How's that?
Looks great.
Yeah? It's like you're there.
Yeah, it is. It's very immersive. Okay.
Yeah. Here,
So-
the mic's on.
Okay.
Just
Thank you for setting all this up.
yeah, you're welcome.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay.
Gabrielle's gonna do
Oh, then I'll.
an intro.
Okay.
I'm just saying. All right, is your last name Chen or just Oprah? I was so smart. I will ask question. Just those two things that all right, so maybe we'll get it going here. Oh my goodness, it's 6:14. People online are like, what are you all doing? Good evening. Is this right? Turn it up. Good evening. Better, right? Yeah, it's good also for the folks that are on. Oh, but there's a little feedback now. Didn't you hear that? It's like, okay, you all are okay? Well, let's try that again then. Good evening. And that's what we like. And welcome. My name is Gabrielle Seville, and I am Director of the MFA Program in Creative Writing here at the California Institute of the Arts. Last time, in our last convening of Writing Now, I promised that I would ask this question again. Whose land are we on? Yay! It is my honor to acknowledge and remind us that the CalArts main campus sits on the unceded ancestral lands of the Chaguayavitum, the people of Chaguayanga, whose present-day descendants are citizens of the Fernandinho Tataviam Band of Mission Indians. They have been here for millennia and will forever call this place home. Through meaningful partnership and collaboration, CalArts is committed to lifting up their stories, culture, and community. This evening on this land, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our second reading in Writing Now, a series highlighting urgent voices in the field of creative writing. At a time when technocrats advocate for automated solutions and artificial intelligence is being insinuated into our daily lives, the work of writers remains vital for recognizing and experiencing truth, compassion, wonder, desire, imagination, ingenuity, complexity, and critique. People, how are we going to make it into the next now? With the blood, sweat, and tears of our emotional intelligence, our creative intelligence, our writing intelligence, our hard-won human connections, and heartfelt friendships. This brings us to our esteemed guest tonight. Jean Chen is known for her explorations of emotional intelligence, human relationships, friendship, identity, location, and queer sexuality. Born in Taiwan, Jean Chen grew up in Southern California. Her novel, Fiona and Jane, follows the friendship of two Taiwanese Americans as they navigate their relationship over decades. Pushing beyond simple positive representations and quotes, Ho insists on the fullness, messiness, and richness of her protagonists' lives. Fiona and Jane was one of Time Magazine's 100 must-read books of 2022, was longlisted for the Story Prize, and was named a Best Book of the Year by, get ready, it's a long list, NPR, Vulture, Vogue, Oprah Daily, Glamour, Harper's Bazaar, Elle, and Electric Literature. Yeah, I think we can do that. Word. Poe's fiction, essays, and criticism also appear in New York Times Magazine, Swanee Review, Guernica, The Cut, LA Times, Los Angeles Review of Books, and elsewhere. She teaches at Chapman University and the Randolph College Low Residency MFA. Do I have that right? Great. And has held appointments at UCLA as a 2025 author in residence, Skidmore College, a 2023-24 visiting assistant professor, and Scripps College, the 2023 Mary Rout Endowed Chair of Writing. Ho has a PhD in literature and creative writing from the University of Southern California. We have some other people here that are repping the spot. And she currently lives in Los Angeles, California. We'll have an opportunity to hear a little of Jean Chen Ho's work and then have a Q&A and maybe even a little discussion. Please welcome Jean Chen Ho. You're welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. It's so nice and dark in here.
It is dark. You like it too?
It's romantic. I'm into it. And there's this, I can actually see because there's this reading light. So great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Muriel and Gabrielle. Thank you, NK, for setting up. I hope the live stream is going okay. NK asked me if I wanted to show a picture. And Muriel was like, oh, how about a picture of the book cover? And I said, no way. It's so intense. So I was like, let me find a picture in my phone of the last time I was in Taiwan, which is in 2019. And it was in December 2019, right before the pandemic. And I remember at that time, I was just going to visit my family. So I was there for about a month. And it was such a intense, lovely time because I had just sold Fiona and Jade, like literally just, the book had been on submission for a few months. And then I had a great conversation with my editor, and like literally, I think in November, like late November of 2019, and then they were working out the deal and everything. And then I got on the plane to go to Taiwan, and like I was just so happy. I remember telling my family back. Most of my family still lives in Taiwan, so I remember telling my family that I had been writing this book, and I finally sold it to a publisher, and it's going to come out. And they were all so happy for me, because nobody in my family is a creative, artistic person. Like, it's just a family full of normal people. So, they were very happy for me, and, like very proud, but I felt so odd at the same time, right? Like, I was visiting my family, and all my cousins are like, successful, normal people. And there was me, like almost 40 years old, still a graduate student, like living off of $30,000 or something like that. And I had just sold my book. So this is a picture of an alleyway that I took. So has anybody here been to Taiwan, to Taipei? Yes. So if you walk around the city, this is like just a lovely architectural element of Taipei, that the buildings are really close to one another. So there's like these tiny alleys, and then you'll have like mopeds riding through, sometimes even cars squeezing through. But the temperature is so humid that plants just flourish. So there's tons of just plants everywhere. And so I just love, the scene of like looking into the alley, and then there's like these balconies. It just reminds me of my childhood because I grew up in Taiwan. So this is from 2019, right after I sold my book. And I even remember people were talking about coronavirus, like, and I was just like, oh, that'll blow over in a couple months, whatever. But yeah, it was really a special time. And now we're in 2026, and the world looks so different, But I'm grateful to be here. I'll read a little bit from the book, and then we can have a discussion. You guys can ask me any questions that you want to ask about the book or about writing or anything. Okay, so Fiona Jane, it's about two women, and they're best friends. They met when they were kids, and then they grew up together. And the whole book is structured in these linked short stories. So some of the stories are from Fiona's point of view, and some are from Jane's point of view. And so all the Jane stories are written in first person, and all the Fiona stories are written in third person. So I think I'll read maybe a section of a story from each character's point of view, and you can kind of see who these two people are. The book spans about 25 years of their friendship. So it starts out when they're in high school, and then into their 20s and 30s. So let's see. I'll read from my favorite story. So there's 10 stories in the book. My favorite story is this story from Jane's point of view. They're 16 years old, and they're learning to drink for the first time. And I really love this story, but as I was putting this book together, like building story by story, sometimes I would finish a story and send it out to lit magazines and whatnot. And this particular story never got placed. Like, I must have sent it out 40, 50 times. And even after I sold the book, I had the publisher, like there's a person at the publisher who helps you place stories like ahead of your book coming out or like the week that your book comes out so you can maybe like get some extra attention, right? And so they were sending out this story. Nobody wanted it. I don't know why. It's my favorite story. Okay, so I'll read a little bit from Go Slow. The year we turned 16, Fiona decided it was time we learned to drink. We drove to the Norwalk swap meet and laid out $50 each for fake IDs from a passport photo, faxing, and color copy stall. A Gujarati family owned the business, and the girl we paid off had graduated from our high school a few years back. When she handed us the finished IDs, we knew right away we'd been scammed. They were flimsy, laminated jobs, no better than Blockbuster membership cards. Overexposed photos of our unsmiling faces glued onto a rectangle of white paper with California identification card typed across the top. Our names and birthdays below, minus those crucial 5 years to age us up to 21. We were too embarrassed to demand our money back. Still, we were eager to test them out. That was when we called Juan. He said he knew a place, and the three of us set out one Saturday night in Shamu, Fiona's hatchback she named after the SeaWorld killer whale because of the corroding white patches all over the black paint. The freeway glowed with stop and go brake lights. We barely moved, no more than 10, 12, 15 miles an hour. 7:30 at night, the sky was a washed out indigo, a few dirty gray wisps hanging low. No doubt Shamu was a hoopty, but she was ours. Well, she was Fiona's, which meant she was mine too. We were best friends. We shared everything. Juan leaned forward in the back seat. Lucky this place doesn't card, he said. You guys are dumb if you think those janky IDs will get you anywhere. Put on your seatbelt before I get a ticket, Fiona said. Juan told me the name of the exit somewhere off the 5 in Garden Grove. He was taking us to a soup jeep, he called it. Anyone Korean here? Okay, so Juan is a Korean-American guy who's like their ne'er-do-well friend. So he's taking them to a soup jeep, he called it. Trust me, Juan said. It's gonna work out. Just be cool. You hear that, Jane? Shut up, I said. I can be cool. Behind there, it's that place in the corner, he said. I looked out the windshield to where Juan was pointing. Fiona steered into the parking lot of a strip mall. She hesitated. Should I park right in front? Between a brightly lit 24-hour donut shop and a dry cleaner's with its pleated metal shutter pulled down for the night, there stood an unmarked storefront with a row of large windows, the glass tinted black. You couldn't see inside at all. A neon sign buzzed red in one of the darkened panes, something spelled out in Korean characters. I exchanged a quick glance with Fiona before we climbed out of Shamu. I could see the excitement in her eyes and that she was trying to hide it. We trailed in behind Juan and sat down at a booth. The place looked nothing like the bars I'd seen on TV. First of all, there was no bar to speak of, no bartender standing behind a long countertop lined with stools. There were tables and chairs and booths, just like at a restaurant, except the lights were dimmed. I smelled fry oil and garlic in the air, and some cleaning agent, a chemical scent like chlorine, but covered by citrus. The walls were papered in newspaper comic strips and glossy magazine ads that people had tagged over it with black Sharpie markers in English and Korean. When the waiter approached, Juan did all the talking. His voice sounded different in Korean, harder somehow, like stone striking stone. The waiter, unsmiling, tipped his head toward Fiona and me. The name tag pinned to his black button-down shirt read Sung, S-U-N-G. A raised pink scar stretched from his left ear to his chin, where a thin patch of short black hair sprouted. I noticed Fiona watching him. Juan answered him, and the waiter nodded, then backed away. What'd he say? I asked. It's cool, said Juan. Should we show him our IDs? I asked. Juan just shook his head and laughed. A minute later, the waiter materialized with a tall pitcher of beer and 3 frosted mugs on a tray. We fell into a nervous silence as he placed everything on the table. Soon as he walked off, Fiona and I looked at each other and busted up laughing. Juan poured out 3 glasses. My first taste of beer nearly made me gag. I sipped slowly, trying to get used to the bitter taste, the bubbles burning down my throat. Half a glass in, I felt heady, my face warm to the touch. You like it? Juan said. This is nice, right? A loud burp escaped Fiona's throat, and she clapped a hand over her mouth. I don't know how I feel, I replied honestly. Is this drunk? Am I? Juan refilled my glass. Juan, I love you, Fiona said. He grunted. No, really, she said earnestly. I love you. Then she turned to me. And Jane, I love you too. I love you the most. So this one turns into a happy ass, Juan said. He looked as pleased as I'd ever seen him. What about you? Jane, said Fiona from across the table. Girl, you okay? I love you too, I said. Oh shit, Juan said. You're one of those depressed drunks. What? I said. No, I'm not. Two types, Juan said knowingly. You're not gonna start crying, are you? The waiter, Fiona said. He's kind of cute. Him? Juan said. You got on beer goggles. I do, Fiona said. What's that? Then she laughed again. Fiona, Juan, and I had been friends since second grade, Miss King's class. Same junior high and same high school too, until Juan got tossed last year when we were sophomores. He was already on probation for ditching a couple of fights, some other stuff. Then one day last April, this football player, a big Samoan dude, decided to punk him for no good reason. Juan had the kind of face that summoned bullies like flies to dog shit. They thought he was stuck up because of the Boys to Men inspired cable knit sweaters, preppy button-down shirts, and cuffed chinos he wore when everyone else sported white tube socks with Adidas slides, size 40 waist jeans, and double XL Fruit of the Loom tees. People called him Pretty Boy and Richie Rich, and they didn't mean it like a compliment either. Fedtu told up at lunchtime and said he heard Juan was talking trash about his girl. Not only did Juan suffer the humiliation of getting his ass beat in front of everyone in the quad, our evil vice principal decided it was the last straw for Juan's disciplinary offenses and kicked him out. And nothing happened to Fedtu. He was a senior with 2 months left and untouchable anyway because of his rushing yards average. Juan got sent down to the continuation school. Did something happen?
My notifications are on.
Should I keep going?
Yeah, you can keep
Oh,
going.
okay.
But it went with the story.
I didn't. Okay.
I think that should work.
They're off now, right?
What'd you say?
They're off now?
I think they're off.
You set it to like focus. That's what makes
I
them
did.
not come in.
I did do not disturb, but when I turned it on, I guess now I'm a part of the stream. I guess when I turned it on, I still got one, so I'm like,
Who was texting you? I wasn't looking.
a
Yeah,
mutual.
with me and Kate, I have a friend, and she's responding to something I said earlier.
Yeah, she's in China right now, actually.
Yeah. So.
I'm just gonna stand right here just in case. I'll give it like 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. So Juan just got punked by this football player. Juan got sent down to the continuation school with the druggies, pregnant girls, and gangbangers. Last stop before dropping out, juvie, or deportation. But Juan wasn't who people thought he was, though. He wasn't some spoiled fuck-up with a dad who owned a chain of liquor stores or gas stations or SAT cram schools. We knew other Koreans like that, sure. But Juan ganked all his fancy clothes. Shoplifting came easy to him, Juan said, because mall security was always too busy hassling the black kids to notice a skinny Asian redeeming his 5-finger discount. For years, he'd used a fake address to go to school with us, a better district than the one in his zip code. Most of the boys we knew from school were Neanderthals with pimples, drenched in cool water cologne. Juan wasn't like them. He was different. We felt safe with him. Fiona and I would never actually tell him to his face, but Juan, he was all right by us. I'm gonna skip ahead. So back at the bar, they're getting drunk, etc., etc. And then they decide to drive to the beach after they're a little bit drunk. Okay, I made Juan promise to drive slow. On the way to Huntington Beach, we passed by an Albert Tacos, and Juan pulled into the drive-thru. Fiona, slumped in the passenger seat, perked up and leaned over Juan to shout into the crackling box. Carne asada taquitos, she cried. Con salsa roja, por favor. To Juan and me, she said, slurring, I'm taking AP Spanish, okay? I'm getting a 5 on that bitch. We cackled and hooted, called her a nerd. Everyone at school knew Fiona was smart and respected her giant brain, but she wasn't considered a geek. She had those big doe eyes with real double eyelids that other girls try to approximate with bits of glue or tiny strips of scotch tape. Her lashes went out to there, and her skin hardly ever broke out. And because she had her tutoring gigs with more clients all the time from positive recommendations, Fiona always had extra dough to spend on new clothes and kicks. She worked extra hard the last 6 months to save up cash and buy shamu. This is so weird, Fiona said. I've never sat here, because she's sitting in the passenger seat. I've never sat here before. She turned her head to look at me in the back seat. It's like I'm you. Ever since Fiona got shamu, my butt has been a permanent fixture in shotgun. A new level of freedom has suddenly opened up. No more running to catch the bus, no more begging our parents for rides. Sometimes we cruise down PCH to Seal Beach and try to sneak into one of the fancy hotel pools, parking blocks off so no one would suspect us of trespassing. At night, we drove up to Signal Hill, where the rich white families lived, to steal their views of the Long Beach Basin, glittering all the way up to the Queen Mary, that old haunted ship. When it was especially clear, you could see lights from Catalina Island leaking out of the ink-black water. And now, here we were, drunk for the first time. I wanted to give up after the swamp meet debacle, but she'd pressed on, insisted we call up Juan. Fiona always knew what to do. You ever gonna learn to drive? Juan said. I found his eyes in the rearview mirror and stuck out my tongue. So what if I'd failed the driving test a couple times? I just needed a little more practice. Tell the truth, he said. I heard you hit a hydrant. The DMV's racist, I said. They didn't even make Tim Lockwood parallel park, and that other wrestler guy, what's his name? I heard he ran a stop sign, but they passed him anyway. Nah, said Juan, you just suck at driving. I kicked the back of the seat. I hate you so much, shut up, I said, but I was laughing too. You love me, been in love since Miss King, he said. Give it up, Jane, never gonna happen. You think Miss King ever misses us? Fiona said. You guys, I have the best idea. Her voice was breathless, full of ardor. We should go visit her. Quit hogging the taquitos, I said. We passed the Albert taco sack between us all the way to the beach. Fiona had a mixtape playing, a cassette one of her admirers had made, Whitney Houston, Tony, Salt and Pepper. Slouched in the back of shamu, I crunched on those thick, greasy sticks, the wind brushing my cheeks and the bass thrumming through my back. The air started smelling of salt. I took it in big gulps. Juan pulled into a parking lot empty of cars at this time of night. Fiona turned the music off. We sat there, cradled inside shamu, listening to the waves beat against the sand and roll back out. We couldn't see anything out there at all. For a while, no one said a word. I recalled a Bible story from years back when I used to go to church with my parents before Baba moved back to Taiwan. Jonah trapped inside the whale, waiting for God to rescue him. The moral was something about betrayal and repentance, forgiveness and second chances. Here with Fiona and Juan, I didn't want to be saved. I made a silent wish to stay like this forever, the three of us, perfect. A shiver went through me. The weight in my shoulders disappeared. Juan was wrong about me and what he said earlier, the two drunk personalities. I was happy. Okay, so I'll stop from that story, but the story goes on. They get into more trouble. Bad stuff happens, etc. Okay. So that's a story from Jane's point of view, and you can kind of see that she really looks up to her best friend. Fiona's the one who's like really smart, really just like, knows what she wants in life and goes after it. And Jane is the one who's always been looking up to her and following her. And then in their 20s, Fiona moves to New York and Jane stays back in LA. And they have this sort of drifting apart in their friendship that happens when you just, grow up. And then as the book progresses, Fiona goes through a lot of career and romantic failures and moves back to LA. And the two of them have to learn how to be friends again in their 30s after having this time apart because they're really two different people. So let me see, what can I read from? So I'll read this story, which is called Clairvoyance. It's from Fiona's point of view, and she's moved back to LA, and she is about to tell Jane that she's pregnant. Fiona hadn't been invited to Jasper's wedding. Jasper's one of her ex-boyfriends from New York. Fiona hadn't been invited to Jasper's wedding, obviously. Later on, she saw pictures online posted by old college friends they both knew, Jasper and his bride posing on the beach in Honolulu. He had on white linen slacks and a cream-colored gaivera, a lei of dark green leaves draped over his shoulders that hung in two thick vines down the front. The wife, pretty in a bookish way, with a bright smile and dark blonde corkscrews. She wore a crown of gardenias and baby's breath on her head. The top and bottom halves of her body looked as if they belonged to two different women. She had narrow shoulders and arms like matchsticks, but below the waist, her hips flared voluptuously. Fiona studied the pictures, trying to decide if she felt anything about them. Jasper, her college sweetheart, her first love. She reached for the phone to call up Jane. Well, you're winning, Jane said. You're on your second marriage. He's only on his first, a laugh in her voice. What an amateur, she said. He looks constipated, Fiona said. He never knew how to smile like a real person. It takes practice to look like a real person, Jane agreed. I never thought he would get married, said Fiona. I always had a feeling he would end up alone and weird. What's her name, Jane asked. Who is she? Kenji says she's rich. Rich how? What did he say? Maybe now he can finally finish writing his novel, Fiona said. This is so funny. Because I haven't, it's 2026. I wrote this story probably like 10 years ago. So, and it's been a while since I read this one out loud. Okay, maybe now he can finally finish writing his novel, Fiona said. It had been more than a decade since Fiona moved to New York straight from undergrad. Back then, she and Jasper were boundless, dancing along the city's golden rhythm. Nothing and nobody could stop them. Fiona, you still there? Jane said. Fiona realized she'd been silent a long while. I'm still here, she said. Guess what? She hesitated a moment. Well, the thing is, I'm pregnant. What? I went to the doctor's yesterday. It's only 11 weeks, but you're having a baby, Jane said. I didn't even know you were trying to. Wait a minute, Jane said, her voice suddenly serious. You want this, right? Yes, Fiona said quickly. I do. We do. Oh my God, I can't believe it, Jane said. She was quiet for a moment. A baby, she said. Congratulations, she added. Did I say that already? Fiona felt warmth spread through her chest. She recognized then that she felt relieved. Now that she told Jane, the baby felt real. Are you having a boy or a girl? Jane asked. Too early to tell, Fiona said. Bobby wants a girl. Of course he does, said Jane. By the way, I can't believe you told him before you told me. Fiona laughed. I mean, he's only the dad. So what? She said. The laughing was back in her voice. Male privilege strikes again. You hate babies, Fiona said. I won't hate yours, she said. You said babies shouldn't be allowed in public last week. Your baby won't be an asshole like the one sitting next to us at brunch. What if she is an asshole, Fiona said. Or he. Dude, see, Jane said, you're totally winning over Jasper. It's sealed now with this baby. Fiona recalled the time she and Jasper walked over the bridge into Brooklyn to cheer for Kenji in the Iditarod, stolen pathmark carts festooned in tinfoil, silk flowers, and painted cardboard. Grown men in stretched lycra bodysuits muffing down Bedford Avenue. Kenji was on a team with some teachers from his high school. Dirty, hardened snow piled up along the sidewalk, her breath visible in the air. At the finish line, she stood with her hand tucked inside the pocket of Jasper's corduroy coat, her ears frozen, nose dripping, watching for Kenji to bend around the corner. When he finally appeared, shopping cart wheels scraping, she'd waved wildly and shouted his name, but couldn't catch his eye. Kenji rushed for the long red ribbon that hung across the middle of the wet black street. She looked up at Jasper then. A smile creased his face. In his eyes, she'd glimpsed her whole future. That was all before Kenji got sick. He'd recovered anyway. It took time, but he got his mouth back, his throat, his voice. His hair grew in after the chemo rounds, his eyebrows and eyelashes. His skin lost that waxy plastic doll sheen. She'd been afraid he might die. If he had, Fiona thought, maybe she and Jasper might have worked things out, sewn together by grief. Then she felt terrible for imagining the possibility. In her New York years, Fiona had lost touch with Jane. She wondered now if it had been on purpose, the way she let the time between returning Jane's phone calls, her emails, stretch out languorously. In truth, didn't she believe her life, the choices she made possible for herself, superior to Jane's? The odd jobs Jane worked and often lost carelessly after they graduated high school. Of course, Jane didn't really have to work, did she? Her mother always floated her money anyway. Then her father died the way he did. Fiona had left California that year. Did I ever tell you, Fiona said quietly into the phone, about the time Jasper and me, we accidentally. She couldn't bring herself to say the words. Was it bad luck to bring it up now? What happened? Jane said. Nothing, Fiona said. She touched a hand to her belly. If she hadn't done it, that child would be how old? Almost a teenager. Hey, you okay? Jane said. I was joking about Jasper, about winning. I had an abortion, Fiona said, years ago. Obviously, I had to. I mean, we talked about it. What if Jasper wanted to keep it more than me? Jane was quiet. It happened right after we moved to New York. We didn't even have a sofa yet. Fiona shook her head. It's not like I regret it or anything. She thought of that apartment on Mulberry Street and recalled the scent of almond cookies from the Italian bakery on the ground floor. It was the right decision, she said. Of course it was, Jane replied. But it just makes me think, Fiona said after a moment. And seeing his dumb wedding photos, think what? I don't know, said Fiona, that some part of me still. I remember thinking when I took that pill to make the abortion happen, we'll get to do it for real one day, me and him. Part of you still what? Jane said. Loves him. No, it doesn't mean anything, Fiona said. I'm happy. She laughed, though she didn't know why. I'm happy. I mean it. Everything's great. What's going on? Jane asked. Nothing, Fiona said. I swear, I'm fine. She laughed again, and this time it felt like she'd pressed a valve, pressure alleviated. Janie, she said, don't you ever think about what other lives you could be living? Hell no, said Jane. What's the point of that? Once it's done, I'm over it. No regrets. You weren't always like that. I learned it from Juan, she said. Now we know where you went wrong, said Fiona, and then they both laughed. After a moment, Fiona said, I was thinking about my mom this week. Jane made a noise, half grunt and half moan, a comforting sound. I know. I miss her too, she said finally. It had been 2 years since Auntie Wendy passed. I think she would have liked Bobby, Jane said. You think so? Fiona wanted to believe her. Tell him I said congrats too, Jane said, and Fiona promised she would. Can I tell you something? Fiona said suddenly. Jane waited for her to go on. I've never told you about my dad. She paused a moment. My biological father, back in Taiwan. She took a breath. I can finally talk about it now that Mom's gone. Jane listened to her best friend tell the story of how her mother became a mother at 16. Her father, Fiona said, was an older boy, a college student studying under Fiona's grandfather. In all the years they'd been friends, Jane had never asked Fiona about her father. It wasn't that she hadn't been curious. Some things, even between friends like they were, remained unspoken, passed over in silence. Fiona talked on. Jane could hardly imagine it. Auntie Wendy, a scandalized teenage mother all on her own. And yet she could see it all so clearly. Fiona, as a little girl, her mother's treasure, protected at all costs. They were happy. Jane knew without Fiona saying so. Mother and daughter close in a way that had always felt foreign to Jane. Growing up, Jane preferred playing at Fiona's house, where there were no restrictions on what they could watch on TV, how long the set stayed on, or whether they'd finish their homework first, where their afternoon snacks were pepperoni Hot Pockets heated up in stiff paper sleeves, fried shrimp and teriyaki hot wings from the casino buffet, and styrofoam takeout containers, where all sorts of kids in the apartment complex dropped by to ask if Fiona wanted to go ride bikes, if they'd heard the ice cream truck go past yet today. And when they were teenagers, Fiona's mother was more like a friend than a parent. She gossiped with the girls, told them outrageous stories about the casino regulars. Auntie Wendy never scolded, unlike Jane's mother, who was always breathing down her daughter's neck, finding fault. Do you ever think about finding him? Jane asked. Your father? No, said Fiona without hesitation. And anyway, now there's no point. She was quiet for a moment. I don't ever want my baby to feel that way, Fiona said. Unwanted. Fiona. I made my mom's life so hard, and then I think about what I did. You were wanted, Jane said. What you and Jasper chose to do, it was the right thing. A pause. Then, and this baby, she's wanted too. She, said Fiona. I have a feeling, said Jane. Okay, so I'll end there with that story. Okay, so let's do Q&A. Yeah. Ask me anything.
So thank you. You know what, I was kind of a question, but actually if you immediately have a question, go for it.
Yeah, ask me.
I have a question about the timeline and how you kind of just decided to pace the story, because I feel like that, I mean, there's micro pacing and there's macro pacing, and I would like to hear more about your experience with that and what kind of challenges you had, or moments of clarity around it.
Oh, I had so many.
Wait, would you mind repeating the question just in case? Because do you think that the folks online would, I mean, just.
Sure. Okay, so the question from NK was if I can talk about micro pacing and macro pacing in Fiona and Jane, and if I had moments of difficulty or moments of clarity. Yeah? Okay. So the book is structured in 10 stories. And the first story that I started writing this when I was in my MFA. I was not writing this book. I was writing sort of practice stories, I would say now. I was always writing stories about Asian American women and girls, and I was always really interested in telling stories from a woman's point of view. And so I was just sort of like trying different things out, like with voice and just character studies, because when, some people enter into their MFA, like really quite advanced with their writing. I was not, like, I wasn't a creative writing major in undergrad. I was an English major, so I had read a ton, but I had like never taken really a fiction writing class. So I had written one story, and that was the one story I used to apply to MFA. So I didn't know what AWP was. I didn't know what lit mags were. I was just like a very green writer, And so I spent those 3 years in my MFA just like reading a lot, trying different things. And like I never published anything. Like I just wasn't ready. I just wasn't, at that stage yet. I was still just trying to figure out what I wanted to write. And then I had a year between my MFA and my PhD at USC. And in that year, I wrote a bunch of nonfiction stuff. Like after the MFA, I was just so burnt out. But, and then when I started the USC program, I started writing these stories that were sort of like more, I would say, like confident, more sophisticated stories, like versions of what I had written in the MFA. And I was in a workshop with my former professor, Amy Bender, and I wrote the first 2 stories in that workshop, which then became, after many, many drafts and revisions, like 2 stories in this book. One story was, it's called The Movers, and that was the first completed story. And it's about Fiona and Jane when Fiona had just moved back from New York, and then very quickly, like Fiona's always getting into like these like screwed up relationships. Everyone has that friend who always like meets some wrong dude and she falls in love with him. So she had moved back to LA and immediately fallen in love with her coworker and then got into this relationship. And then in this story, she's like breaking up with him and Jane is helping her move out. And so that was the first story. And it was published in The Offing, and that was like my first lit mag publication. And I was just like so pleased. And that was in like 2016, 10 years ago. And so from that story, I just was still continuing to be interested in who these 2 characters were. So this is a very long, rambly way to answer your question. But like when I after I wrote The Movers, I just was curious, like, well, who is this woman who is helping her friend move, and why is there so much tension between them? It seems like they've been friends for a long time, and it seems like she's like thinking about her dad for some reason. So then I was like, well, I'm going to write a story about who they were in high school, because I just didn't know who they were. I didn't know like their background. So I wrote a story about them in high school, and then that became like a really messy version of Go Slow, like which I read from, So from there, I just, from story to story, in terms of like structure and macro pacing, like there was always some element once I finished another story that I wanted to know more about. I wanted to know who Jane's father was. And at that point, I didn't even know that Jane was queer. And then if you read the book, you'll find out that her dad was like closeted or bi, and then he like had a lover in Taipei. And so that was like a really interesting surprise. But then when she finds that out, she like totally rejects him, Mm-hmm. So, and then I realized like, oh, the Fiona character moves to New York, and then I was like, well, what's she running towards, or what is she running away from? So I just grew the book story by story, and I did not have a plan in terms of the macro pacing of it all. And then eventually, I think I had like 13 stories. And then I was like, at that point, trying to query agents and try to get representation. And then once I signed with my agency, my agent told me, like, this book is not ready to go out on submission. Like, you still have to continue revising it. So we did that for another year. And then I ended up cutting 3 of the stories because they just weren't coming through. So that's how we ended up with finally just 10 stories. Yeah, and it was a really chaotic process at times. I had a lot of challenges, a lot of self-doubt, I would say, a lot of self-loathing, and then I would just like somehow find the strength to keep going, whether that was just through talking to friends who were also trying to write books, or sometimes you have to just take a break from it, but it took a really long time. So I wrote that first story in 2015, like the fall of 2015. And then the book wasn't sold until 2019. So it took me about 4 years to write this book. And then after it was sold, of course, there's like more editing you have to do. It never ends. It never ends. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. I had a question. A little bit ago, you kind of more generally as a writer. I think there's something you said before you started reading it, interesting more after the book, is that you're like the only person in your family that's a creative. And I'm kind of the same way, where it's like a lot of my family's very different on both sides, but yeah, I don't really want to do anything kind of remotely creative. And I always find it interesting with that, and what kind of spot, like what would make you so interested in something creatively, I guess. Like it's always very different for different people.
Okay, so I'll repeat the question for the microphone. So earlier I had said that I'm the only person in my family who's doing anything creative. I'm the only writer, and the question was, what is that? Just like to talk about what that's like.
Yeah, because what made you want to?
What made me want to write? I've always loved books. I think I'm quite introverted. I'm an only child, and so I think I don't know, I just loved reading from a young age. Like it's probably the same for everyone here, right? Like if you don't fall in love with books at a young age, you're probably not going to end up in an MFA program, because you're just, that's what we all have in common. We're just so enthralled with storytelling and books. And so even though like my parents they're not readers, like they'll read the newspaper, but like literally growing up, we didn't have a single novel in my house, like we had, my dad was like a computer science, like IT guy. And so we like literally the only books we had in our house were like his technical manuals and like the Bible. But my mom would always like take me to the library as a kid and like let me check out books. And so I don't know, I think just from an early love of reading, and like I wasn't even reading anything particular. I was reading like, you know, V.C. Andrews and like just like really sort of like trashy romance novels and or like Stephen King, like just like genre books that were like really exciting and fun. And then that led to, you know, me becoming an English major in college and doing more reading. But even after that, I still did not have the wherewithal or the courage to do my own creative writing. Because I think to me back then, it felt so frivolous to want to do something like that. Nobody encouraged me to do that, even though I obviously loved reading, and it just didn't seem like a viable option, you know? Like I thought being a writer meant you had to be a journalist, you know, or because I grew up in LA, I thought maybe I could go into like Hollywood or something completely ridiculous. But I didn't, like I somehow never thought that like novels were written by real people. Like I just did not make that connection. You know what I mean? Like I thought novels just came from like the mouth of God, you know? They're just these like powerful objects you get in the library. So I don't know, like I just had this huge block. I literally remember like going to Barnes and Nobles, and then there would be like a section of like how to become a writer or like, you know, craft books. And I remember sort of like tiptoeing into that section and being, I mean, it sounds so stupid, but I was like deathly afraid that somebody would walk in and discover that I was in that section, like wanting to write. You know, it was so embarrassing. I was so deeply ashamed of that desire because it just seemed so completely out of bounds. Like it would be like as if I was saying I wanted to be an astronaut or something, you know? And then so throughout my 20s, I was like doing various arts nonprofit jobs because I was actually a grant writer. So I knew that I had writing skills. So I applied those to writing grants for these nonprofit organizations. And then I somehow like found there was like one writing workshop at Santa Monica College that I took. And then that's how I wrote that one story that I used to submit to apply to MFAs. Like in that class, that's where I learned that there's this thing called an MFA where you can go to grad school and learn how to write. And that happened like in my late 20s. I think at the time I was about to turn 30. And I was like, oh my God, I'm fucking old, you know, like, which is so ridiculous. Like 30 is so young. But I remember thinking like, oh my God, like, I can't believe I'm turning 30. I really have to like do something to change my life. And I think that's when I was like, okay, I'm gonna like try to apply to MFA programs and take writing more seriously. And that's how it all really started. You know, it takes a long time. It takes like so many small steps. And I do think a big part of it is just giving yourself permission, you know, at least it was for me.
I just have a follow-up on that because, so it's amazing. I mean, you started with the Santa Monica College sort of workshop or class that then got you to the MFA program. What made you want to continue to do the PhD?
Okay.
I'm really mentioning this too because often I think in our program in the second year there are people that are considering further kind of education, and so I'm just curious what it meant for you and to go to a PhD program with writing and literature together.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question, to repeat for the mic, the question is, why did I decide to continue after the MFA to do a PhD in creative writing and literature? So you know, as I was saying earlier, the stories I was writing in my MFA, they weren't publishable. Like I didn't know that at the time, and I wasn't even like trying to publish. I was just trying to learn how to write and try to figure out like what I wanted to write, you know? So I was just doing a lot of imitations of writers I admired, right? So like probably for a period of time, I sounded a lot like Toni Morrison, or for another period of time, I was trying to sound like Murakami, or just like trying out different modes of fiction so that I could find a way to my own voice, right? Like that was what the MFA was about. And so after I graduated, I had my MFA thesis, but I was just sort of like, well, how can I continue working on writing? And my life circumstances at that point, I feel very lucky because I was able to move back into my parents' house. So like I mean, some people don't like to do that, but, and I don't want to either, but I was just like, well, at least I can live here for like 6 months or something while I figure out what I'm gonna do. So I did that. And then in that time was when I was doing some freelance writing. And then I went back to doing some part-time grant writing for nonprofits, which is what I was doing before I went to the MFA. And then I decided to, you know, try to apply for some of these fellowships like Provincetown, the Stegner Fellowship. And then since I had like this, you know, 25-page sample and a personal statement, I was like, let me see what PhD programs are out there. I honestly just sort of did it on a whim. I didn't even know what a PhD was. I didn't know how intense it would be. I just knew that I applied to various programs where there were faculty that I wanted to work with. And so I think I applied to maybe, you know, 3 or 4 PhD programs, and those writing fellowships, they got rejected from everything except USC. That was my one acceptance. That's been the story of my life, okay? I rejected so many times except for I get the one thing. So I was MFA too. I was rejected by like 10 different MFA programs except for that one at UNLV, and then USC, and I was rejected by every publisher except for Viking. That was the one publisher that wanted to buy my book. So you just need one. Yeah, but when I got the call from USC, I was like, oh wow, okay, this is so cool. I can't believe Amy Bender called me. Like, wow, that's amazing. And then I don't know, I honestly didn't know what I didn't know what it was gonna be like getting, like, I don't know, like, and it was such an intense time because our program at USC, you know, there are writing workshops, which obviously I was familiar with, but you're also in classes where you're reading these like crazy dense theoretical texts with not other MFA graduates, but MA graduates, right? So people who had like 2 or 3 years of training in a master's program, who knew who Theodore Adorno was, or like had read all of their literary theory. I had none of that, right? Like I had maybe had some of that as an English major in undergrad, but my MFA program, I did not have any theory classes. So I had a really hard time in my coursework the first couple of years. And then, you know, I got caught up to speed because I'm just like really a very hardworking person. And I wanted to prove to these other graduate students that just because I'm a fiction writer doesn't mean that I'm like less intellectually rigorous or something. So I really felt like I had a lot to prove. And then, you know, you finish your coursework and then you have to go through your exams. And I remember one of my mentors at USC pulling me aside because I was like really anxious about passing my critical exams. And he was like, you're gonna get through this, it's fine. And I was like, no, what are you talking about? I'm like dying. I have to read like 100 books in the next 2 months. And he was like, listen, your professors support you. You're gonna pass these exams. We know that you can do it. But Jean, if you leave this program without having a book contract, we're gonna have failed you because that's what, you know, rooting for you is that, like, yes, you're going to get through the critical part of this, and then you're going to have these theoretical skills, but you really need to use this time to focus on your book. Like, where's your book? Like, where, like, don't think so much about proving yourself and trying to convince people that you're smart because you can, like, understand and regurgitate this theory. Like, you really need to focus on your fiction. And that was like such a much needed reality check that I had in like my 3rd or 4th year in the program. So all of that to say, I went into the PhD program not knowing what I was getting myself into, to be quite honest.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Chris?
Yeah, can I ask you a question about perception? Because it's interesting, like that you were bringing up that it was like 2019 and you found out that we're looking to take in it, 2022.
Yes, yes.
So like, we were just looking in this class, I teach here about, looking at your essay, Sex Workers Care Work. It's been like 5 years since the Atlanta spa shootings. And so I'm just thinking that like Fiona and Jen, remembering like such a wonderful book. It was deservedly got a lot of like love to it. And I think it kind of came in the aftermath of all this like sort of like COVID anti-Asian movements, right? Including the spa. So it's almost like this kind of like medicine. Like sort of it's like it's just like it's still these needs for people. Can you talk about that a little bit? How it came? I was like looking at this cover and like this looks like everyone tries to do this cover now.
It was part of the trend for sure. Okay, so I'll repeat Chris's question about. So I wrote this book in the years like 2015 to 2019, but it came out in 22. So Chris's question was about. I think like I had also written this essay about like following the Atlanta shooting of these Asian American women who worked in massage parlors. So I had written an essay, a personal essay in response to the shock and grief of that. And also like in the COVID era, how much anti-Asian sentiment and violence there were against the community, especially older people, people like our parents' age. So I guess the question is to just sort of talk about my book in the context of all of that. Yeah, it was a really odd and complicated time because so my book came out in January 22 and things were still really COVID-y. At least, I myself felt really like not ready to return to the outside world, And it's so funny, like Chris, I remember I was supposed to go visit you at St. Thomas. You had invited me to come do a reading and I had to cancel that event because I was so anxious. Like I had done so many events in the first like 3-4 months of the book coming out, that I started, there was one time, I think it was like on the way to, it might have even been on the way to your event, or it happened again when I was going to AWP, which was in, I think, Philly that year. But I started getting vertigo in the Uber, and then I had to like ask the driver to pull over because I was like shaking, and then I threw up on the side of the road because my body was just having such a massive reaction to having to, like talk about myself and talk about this book. And it's just, I don't know, I was just like way too overwhelmed, I think, having to do all of these book events. And I don't know, that was a really, it was a reality check moment because, while publishing a book is so joyful and it's like the culmination of so many years of hard work, like the expectation for authors to also be like this public persona, I think is like, for me, it was quite hard, and of course I wanted to do everything I could to support this book, but in the wake of like, coming out of COVID, in the wake of all the really just like psychological effects of seeing that like elderly Asian grandmas were being like punched in the face or something. Like the world was just such a weird, crazy place. Like after 4 years of the first Trump administration, I don't know. I just, I like it came to like a psychological and physical breaking point for me where I had to just say like, I can't do any more events. I need to take a break, you know? So that's like I guess that's a very sad way to answer the question that I was so overwhelmed. But you know, I canceled some events and I was just like able to just rest and recover. And, you know, in the years following that, I'm still really grateful that I get to meet readers. I get to come to MFA programs like this one, and have like authentic conversations with other writers and with people who are really interested in the book. And it feels really nice, you know, to be able to share that even this many years out. Yes.
Can you speak to like your philosophy around like your work ethic? Like you said, you're a hard worker. Like
Yeah.
I feel like there's so much about like time management that we as writers have to figure out, and
Yeah.
so much empty space that feels empty, and like it's like I know I should be doing something. And what is kind of like, are there like certain pillars of your work ethic that like things like that?
Oh, I have so many. Okay, so the question is like, what are the pillars of my work ethic? I have so many ways to answer this, and they're all very boring, but I'll share them with you. One of them is that I write in the morning, because, and that was something that I had to train myself to do. I think that started happening in the MFA because I was like, you know, in the MFA, you're in classes, but you're also in the program that I was in, I was teaching for, you know, my grad stipend. And so, and I wanted to obviously like hang out with my friends and go to the bar and like socialize, all that kind of stuff. But I started like making a list of all the things that I had to do. And then I realized like writing this short story always fell to the bottom of the list because I would be like, oh, I have to make a lesson plan for my teaching tomorrow, or like, you know, I had a part-time job, right? And so I started just like making myself write first thing in the morning. And then the second thing is I stopped looking at my phone first thing in the morning. That was like life-changing, you know, because I realized as soon as I start looking at my phone, even if I'm not answering emails or replying to my friends' texts, I'm thinking about it already. Like I'm thinking about what I have to do or what I'm gonna say, and then that starts taking up space in your brain, right? And so I try not to look at my phone until about 11 a.m. or like noon if I can help it, so that my time from like, if I get up, like I don't get up that early, but if I get up at like 8, and then I drink coffee, I eat breakfast, but I'll write from like 9 to 11 if I can help it, like if I have a free morning. And so it's a way of orienting your life and teaching your body and your mind that writing comes first, because no one's going to make you do that. You know what I mean? Like maybe if you have a deadline for a workshop, then you feel like, oh, I have to turn something in, but you really have to build that into your daily schedule, or like 3 days a week, whatever it is for you. And then the other part of that question that I want to say is that writers need a physical exercise. Okay, so I never played sports growing up because I was such a book nerd. So I never went to the gym. I don't like team sports or anything. But in my MFA, I started doing yoga, and so that has been like my physical practice for the last 15 years. And so I do yoga, I go on walks. I don't do anything like too crazy, very low impact. But I think that I realize is a huge part of my writing practice. Like sometimes you just get really stuck in your mind, and going for a walk just like really like loosens things up. Yeah. So it's not, I like to say like, even though you're not actually sitting there writing, like your mind, if you're taking a walk or doing yoga or whatever your physical practice is, it's still somehow working on it in a subconscious way. Yeah, so more writing in the morning for me is key, and then going for a little walk or doing yoga in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Other questions? It's about 7:20.
Last question?
Yes, yeah, please. Yeah.
Last question.
Yeah.
Okay. You started off before reading with this, but I was really curious on how you ended up landing on writing in first person perspective for Jane, and then third person for Fiona, especially since at the end it was like, oh, that's why. I was curious about like how you ended up landing there.
Okay. Great question. So just to repeat, the question was why I wrote Jane's stories in first and Fiona's stories in third. So I think I naturally like to write in first person. You know, that's how I discover the character. Is like I just let them start talking. And so, like I said, the first story I wrote for this book was a story called The Movers when they're in their 30s. And that story just came out naturally in first person. I didn't know who Jane was. I didn't know anything about her family. You know, I only knew like those 25 pages worth of this friendship between these two women. And so I think I'm changing now, like 15 years later after I started the MFA, you know, like I'm actually finding like I like to write in third person now, which to me is so odd. But when I was writing Fiona and Jane, I really love the first person voice. Like the Jane voice just came really naturally to me. Like she's a little prickly. She likes to make little jokes when she's uncomfortable. You know, so she's a little bit avoidant. So that voice just came very naturally to me. And then when I was writing the Fiona stories, some of them also in first draft were in first person. And then as I was building more of the stories out, like all the Jane stories always came out in first person, but some of the Fiona stories started coming out in third person. And then when I realized I was like maybe possibly writing this collection of linked stories, I realized like, oh, it would make more sense if all the Fiona stories, like all those stories relating to that character were in third person. So I really, I had to do some work to change some of those first person Fiona stories to third, and that was a tough revision. But yeah, that's how it happened.
But why was it better though for them not to be two different first persons, just to keep it more clear?
Yeah, I think it was a more interesting reader experience, and then getting to see Fiona's life from a third person perspective, I think felt less claustrophobic, you know, because you can move around a little more easily, I think, in third person and zoom out, and you can still zoom in and really get what she's thinking and feeling. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much.
Thank you all so much for having me.
Great to have you here, and we do have snacks and little sort of beverages over here. Thanks again to NK, and we'll have a little time to mingle and chat. Thanks again for coming to Writing Now. Here, we'll say goodbye to the people on the goodbye. Yay. Now I'm gonna turn on some light, y'all. Night is falling. We need to get a little light.